My name is Daniel Kessler. I'm 48 years old. For the past 11 years, I've been the senior operations manager at a mid-sized logistic firm in Denver. I wasn't flashy. I preferred precision to politics, results to recognition. I was the kind of man who arrived before the lights turned on and left only when everything had been handled. I don't say that to impress you. It's just who I've always been. Reliable, predictable, and apparently forgettable. It was a Friday evening. We were at the annual corporate dinner, hosted in a hotel ballroom that reeked of cologne and celebration. I was told there'd be an important announcement. After months of leading the company through its highest performing quarter and training a new hire from scratch, I had reason to believe I'd finally be stepping into the director role. I didn't chase titles, but this one I earned. I bled for it. I stayed up all night, fixing systems no one else understood. I carried people. I held the floor together. So, when Marcus, my boss, clinked his fork against his champagne glass and cleared his throat to make the big announcement, I sat up a little straighter. He called the room to silence, glanced around, and smiled in my direction. I nodded politely. He turned his gaze past me and said her name. "Let's all congratulate Amelia, our new director of operations." I felt the applause before I heard it, like a wave hitting me in the back. She gasped, stood up, hugged Marcus like a daughter might hug a proud father. She was 4 months in. 4. I had trained her, wrote her onboarding guide myself. She shadowed me. I cleaned up her first 2 failed rollouts, but now she was smiling wide under the chandelier, thanking the leadership team, raising her glass to the crowd like she built the very ground we stood on. When Marcus stepped over to me afterward, his voice was low and corporate slick. "Dan, I know this might be unexpected, but Amelia, she just has that spark. She's bold, fresh. You've been amazing, really. But the board wants a new direction." I smiled. I nodded. I clinked my glass to his. "Of course," I said. "She'll do great." I watched the bubbles rise, then fall. So did my trust. That night I went home in silence. I didn't throw anything. I didn't rant. I didn't text my wife in all caps. I just sat in my study, stared at the wall where my 10-year service plaque hung, and waited, not for pity, not even for justice. I waited for Monday, because I knew what was coming, and so did they. They just didn't know it yet. Over the weekend, I played the role I'd perfected over the years, calm, collected, composed. But inside, something had shifted. Not bitterness, not rage, just a quiet seal breaking deep within me. I kept hearing Marcus's words on a loop. "She has that spark," as if loyalty had no glow. As if showing up for 11 years with solutions and stability meant less than 4 months of noise. I replayed that moment in the ballroom again and again, but never let it touch my expression. That was my first act of power, restraint. I thought about the little things, the missed signs, the way Marcus had started calling Amelia into meetings that used to be mine, how she began bypassing me and going directly to senior leadership, asking questions I had already answered. I saw it. I just didn't want to admit it. There were lunches I wasn't invited to anymore, jokes I wasn't copied in on. I told myself it was just growing pains, mentorship in motion, but I was wrong. They weren't building her up beside me. They were replacing me, right under my nose. Still, I didn't let it show. Monday morning I arrived at 7:30 a.m. As always, the office was quiet, cold with fluorescent silence. I made my coffee, reviewed the systems, and updated the master operations file. The same file Amelia now had to handle. I'd kept every change documented, every protocol adjustment dated and sourced. It wasn't out of paranoia, it was just how I worked. But now, that habit would serve a different purpose. She walked in late, 10 minutes after 9. Bright smile, Starbucks in hand. "Good morning, Daniel," she chirped, settling into my old desk, now moved closer to the corner office. I nodded back. "Morning, Director," I said, with a polite smile that held more truth than she realized. She didn't see the storm. She didn't notice the slight red in my eyes from a sleepless night of remembering every shortcut I'd ever let her take. That entire day, I played the ghost. Helpful, invisible. I didn't speak unless spoken to. I watched her fumble through the daily stand-up I used to run like a conductor. She spoke in buzzwords and optimism, but the team looked confused. Logistics people need clarity, not charisma. She hadn't realized yet that confidence without command is just noise, and noise dies fast. By Tuesday, she was already asking me for clarification. "Hey, where's the updated vendor matrix? Daniel, do we still run weekly fulfillment audits or monthly now?" I answered each question slowly, kindly, without any sarcasm, and every time she walked away, I made a note, not of her ignorance, but of her desperation and her cracks. They were showing sooner than expected. By Wednesday, I started doing what I do best, organizing, not spreadsheets this time, but thoughts, evidence, leverage. You see, when you're the one who built the system, you know exactly where the weaknesses are. I never flaunted my knowledge. I wasn't the kind of man who demanded credit, but I kept receipts. Not out of spite, but because in logistics, if you don't track details, you lose control, and now, the people who had forgotten that were in charge. I pulled together a comprehensive operations analysis report, the kind that takes a month to complete if you don't know the back end. I had it done in 4 hours. It outlined inefficiencies I had flagged 6 months ago, ones that were unresolved due to Amelia's rushed implementation of a new tracking system she didn't fully understand. I didn't forge anything. I didn't spin facts. I simply illuminated what was already there, hidden in the data. Then, I quietly sent that report to the board's internal audit lead, someone I'd worked closely with during our last merger. I worded the email carefully, respectful, professional. I wrote, "Attached is a report I compiled in light of recent operational transitions. I thought it might offer clarity moving forward. I'll defer to your judgment on whether this needs further discussion. No bitterness, no finger-pointing, just precision, clean, surgical." By Thursday, the tension in the office had shifted. Amelia looked flustered. Her morning smile was slower. She kept checking her phone between meetings. She passed me twice in the hallway and didn't say a word. I could feel it. Something had landed. I didn't need confirmation. I didn't want to see her fall. But I did want her to see the truth, that position wasn't about energy or performance. It was about knowledge, about quiet strength, and she had neither. On Friday, Marcus called me into his office. His tone was off, too careful. "Dan, there's some concern from the board about a few procedural gaps. Nothing serious, just observations." I nodded slowly. "I'm happy to help where I can." He looked at me, trying to read my expression. He wouldn't find anything there. I wasn't performing. I wasn't gloating. I was simply doing what I'd always done, solving problems before they exploded. That night, I walked past Amelia's desk. She was still there, surrounded by open files, brows furrowed, eyes tired. I gave her a soft nod. She didn't return it. Maybe she knew, or maybe she still believed she could fake her way through. But the thing about silence, it's not passive, it's patient, and I was just getting started. By Monday morning, the audit team was on site. That didn't happen often. When they did show up, it was usually with quiet shoes and tight folders. They didn't make noise. They made statements. Amelia tried to play it cool, even joked about having everything under control, but I could see her nerves in the way her fingers tapped too fast on the desk, how she kept mispronouncing the names of processes I had created from scratch. I didn't involve myself in the meetings. I wasn't invited, and I didn't need to be. The system would speak for me. By Tuesday, the auditors had requested back-end access logs and chain of custody reports for fulfillment overrides. Something Amelia had never learned to document properly. Meanwhile, I kept doing my work. Same schedule, same quality. But now I wore a new armor, clarity. I didn't need to expose her. I just needed to wait while the truth moved through the pipes she didn't know how to seal. Marcus grew quieter as the week unfolded. He stopped making eye contact in the hallway. One morning, he paused by my desk and said, "Hey, Dan, would you have time later this week to go over some of the original templates you built for vendor evaluation?" I nodded once. Of course, no smugness, no victory in my tone. Just the same steady professionalism he once took for granted. By Thursday, Amelia's smile had vanished completely. I overheard her on the phone using buzzwords again, this time desperate ones. "It's just a temporary gap." That's how Daniel used to do it. But I thought we were streamlining. She still didn't understand that knowing the words isn't the same as knowing the work. There's no shortcut to history. And now history was quietly correcting itself. That afternoon, she walked into the break room while I was making coffee. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw it. The crack in her armor. Not anger, not defiance, but fear. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then shut it and walked out. She wasn't the villain in my story, just a symbol, a reminder of how quickly people will forget who held the line when everything was falling apart. Friday came with a formal email, subject, interim role adjustments. The wording was careful, corporate. Effective immediately, Daniel Kessler will provide direct oversight and restructuring guidance for operations. It wasn't an apology, but it was a pivot, and it was public. Amelia was reassigned to a project-based support position. No announcement this time, no champagne, just silence. The same silence I had used to rebuild my name, one quiet day at a time. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice or write a smug reply. I walked into the next leadership meeting as if nothing had changed. Because for me, nothing had. I was still the man who showed up early, who fixed what no one else noticed was broken, who kept the wheels turning while others chased the spotlight. The difference now was that the silence I'd been carrying wasn't just mine anymore. The board had heard it, the staff had felt it, and Marcus, he finally understood what I'd never said aloud. Amelia was moved to a temporary desk near the IT liaison team. It was a quieter part of the building, away from glass walls and high-profile meetings. I passed her desk once midweek. She was hunched over a laptop, headphones in, face drawn. I didn't linger. I didn't smile. I had no interest in punishment. I just wanted her to feel what I had. The loneliness of being seen only when needed, then discarded when someone shinier came along. She felt it now, and it stung more than words ever could. Marcus approached me later that week, his tone noticeably softer. "Dan, listen. About the last few months, I may have gotten caught up in trying to push for flash over foundation." I looked at him, calm. "You made a decision." "I just made sure the system told its side of the story." He nodded slowly, almost respectfully. We both knew there was more he wanted to say, but I wasn't there for closure. I was there for results. Behind the scenes, I reinstated the protocols Amelia had scrapped, cleaned up vendor miscommunications, rebuilt timelines that had been quietly unraveling. I did it without complaint, without commentary. I let the work speak, and the team, many of whom had stood by in silence during her rise, now started coming to me again, not because I demanded it, because they remembered who had kept them afloat. What people rarely understand is that revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't need to arrive in a blaze. Sometimes the most powerful justice is watching people confront the weight of their own choices in real time, without you having to lift a finger. Amelia hadn't stolen my position. She had borrowed a crown she couldn't carry, and it had returned to me on its own, dented, but still mine. By the end of that quarter, performance metrics were back on track. I submitted a long-term restructuring plan and quietly declined the permanent director title when it was offered again. I didn't need it anymore. I had already won something better: their memory, their respect, and my own peace. There's a strange kind of stillness that comes when you reclaim your name without ever raising your voice. That Monday after the restructuring email, I sat at my desk, watching the sun move across the floor, quiet as a secret. No one said anything out loud, but I could feel the shift. The same colleagues who used to ignore me during Amelia's rise were now reappearing, emails, CCing me again, hallway nods, quick, "Can I ask your advice?" moments that told me everything I needed to know. Reputation, I realized, is a currency that matures with silence. I didn't want her job anymore. What I wanted, I already had: the calm understanding that no one could take from me what I had built inside myself. I wasn't just the man who managed systems, I was the man who rebuilt them when others failed. That realization did something to me, not pride, something quieter, maybe grace, maybe wisdom. Because when you survive betrayal and don't become bitter, you become unshakable, and I was done shaking. Amelia avoided me completely after the reassignment. Not a word, not a glance. It was as if I reminded her of everything she wanted to forget: the price of shortcuts, the weight of unearned titles, the reality of earned respect. I didn't pity her, but I didn't hate her either. I saw her clearly now, not as an enemy, but as a mirror. At one point in my career, I probably believed charm and performance were enough too. The difference was, I had learned better. She still had time, if she was willing to feel it. Marcus became more careful in his leadership after that. He began to consult before deciding, and not just with the loudest voices in the room. I wasn't eager to be his advisor, but he started treating me like one, subtly, and I let him. Not for him, for the younger version of myself, who once thought being excellent was enough to protect you from being overlooked. I wanted the next version of me in that office to have a better shield. On Thursday, I sat in on a client strategy call with 2 board members. One of them, Mr. Hunley, stayed behind afterward. He looked at me, then at the closed office door, and said, "Daniel, thank you for handling everything the way you did. You reminded all of us that real leadership doesn't advertise itself." That moment stayed with me. Not because it was flattering, because it confirmed what I had known all along. There is strength in silence. And that strength had now become my legacy. Not the job title, not the corner office, not even the system I had saved. My legacy was the quiet decision I made to stay calm, stay present, and wait. I raised my glass that Friday night, knowing Monday would speak louder than anything I could have shouted, and it did. A week after Amelia's reassignment, HR quietly released a new internal training protocol, one based entirely on the systems I had created years ago. They even used my original terminology. They didn't credit me. They didn't need to. I knew. I saw the fingerprints, the phrasing, the structure. My voice had become embedded in the company's DNA, even when they tried to silence it. That was the kind of victory no email blast could replicate, one that lasted longer than applause. I began mentoring a junior analyst named Ryan. Quiet kid, smart, observant, reminded me of myself when I first started. One day he asked, "How do you stay so calm when people try to pass you over?" I looked at him for a moment, then said, Because I don't serve people's perception of me. I serve what I know I'm capable of. He nodded slowly, like it hit somewhere deep, and maybe that was the real payoff. Not revenge, but becoming someone who no longer needed it. Amelia eventually took a leave of absence. No fanfare, just a memo and an empty desk. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. Life has a way of teaching the lessons we refuse to learn gently, and when we resist, it teaches harder. She'd gotten the title without the roots, and the roots always outlast the leaves. Maybe one day she'll find her footing again somewhere where she can earn her voice. I hope she does, but I won't wait to see it. Meanwhile, Marcus invited me to join a confidential think tank. The board was assembling not for operations, but for culture. That was a twist I didn't expect. For the first time in my career, they weren't just asking for my mind. They were asking for my philosophy. What made people stay? What made people fall apart? I accepted, not for them, but for the silent workers like me who still believed that loyalty wasn't outdated. I walked into that meeting with no need to prove anything, and for the first time, people leaned in when I spoke. Not because I spoke louder, but because I had survived what most only pretend to understand, being invisible and still winning. And I didn't win by becoming louder. I won by staying rooted. The irony? My name was never mentioned in the original promotion email. No celebration, no toast, no photos. But now, weeks later, my decisions were being modeled. My words quoted, my methods adopted. I wasn't a memory, I had become a blueprint. There's something deeply satisfying about becoming the kind of man people now whisper about. Not because of scandal, but because of quiet power. I saw it in the eyes of my colleagues when they asked for my input now. I saw it in the way Marcus paused before speaking, as if measuring my reaction before finalizing a decision. I didn't need to speak often. Silence had already proven its worth. Every nod I gave, every pause I held, it meant something now. The board eventually asked me to conduct a full internal review on staff training, mentorship culture, and leadership transitions. It was everything I had tried to offer years ago, now wrapped as innovative insight. I didn't resent the timing. I had grown past needing to be the first name on the list. What mattered more was knowing they finally understood the value of the one who never left when things got hard. Amelia's departure sparked quiet conversations among upper management. People began reassessing how they'd treated others. It wasn't guilt, necessarily, more like discomfort. They saw how quickly things unraveled without the scaffolding of the steady, unseen hands, and that's when the truth settled in. Flash might start the fire, but consistency keeps the house warm. I never told anyone what it felt like, watching someone else take my place that night in the ballroom. I kept that part for myself, because the world doesn't always reward the right people immediately, but time always balances the scale. And now, I was no longer chasing balance. I had become it. Sometimes, I'd walk into the office late on purpose, not to slack but to observe, to see who stood up when things got messy, to see who quietly fixed what others broke. I started to notice the invisible ones, and I made it a point to say their names in rooms they weren't invited to yet. That, to me, was the full circle moment. Not just surviving betrayal, but ensuring the next Daniel wouldn't have. Redemption, I learned, isn't loud. It doesn't come with applause or closure. It comes with clarity. With the moment you realize you no longer need to be recognized to feel powerful. You just need to remember who you were when no one was looking and stay that man, even when the lights finally come on. By the third month after everything shifted, I noticed how much lighter I felt. Not because I had taken anything back, but because I had let go. Let go of needing validation. Let go of proving points. let go of the quiet ache that used to sit behind my ribs every time I felt overlooked. It's strange how healing feels like nothing at first, just a stillness, like a room after a storm. But eventually that stillness becomes peace, and peace, I realized, is louder than any promotion ever was. I started taking my lunch breaks outside, something I hadn't done in years. I'd sit on the bench behind the building, watch the clouds shift, hear conversations of employees walking past, laughing, planning, dreaming. I used to think time spent away from the desk was wasted, but now I knew better. Sometimes stepping away is the only way to see clearly. I wasn't just rebuilding my place in the company. I was rebuilding my life, one slow breath at a time. Ryan, the young analyst I'd been mentoring, got promoted. His reaction wasn't loud. He shook my hand, quietly said, "Thank you for showing me what it means to lead before you're given the title." That meant more to me than any bonus ever had, because I hadn't just endured, I had planted something, and now I was watching it grow. As for Marcus, our relationship shifted into something neither of us expected. Not friendship, but something steadier, mutual clarity. We didn't revisit the past. There was no need. His behavior now said what his words couldn't. He consulted me, credited me, and more importantly, stopped underestimating what he couldn't immediately see. That was enough. Amelia? I heard through HR that she moved to a smaller startup out of state. I don't know if she left by choice or necessity, but I didn't chase the answer. Some stories don't need closure. Some wounds are better left untouched once they've scabbed over. I had forgiven her, not for her, but for me. Carrying the weight of betrayal was too heavy for the life I was building now. And so, my days became quieter again. But not the kind of quiet that feels like absence. This time, it felt like strength. I was no longer a man trying to reclaim something. I was a man who had found something more valuable, himself. I began sleeping better. That's how I knew something deep had shifted. No more late nights staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations I should have had, or things I should have said. No more rehearsing comebacks, or wondering what might have happened if I'd just spoken up sooner. The noise was gone. In its place was something I hadn't felt in years. Rest. Not just physical, but emotional. Soul deep. Like I had finally exhaled after holding my breath for a decade. The company continued to grow. The systems I'd rebuilt now ran smoother than ever, and I stepped back from the frontline roles voluntarily, shifting into an advisory position where I could guide without carrying the full weight. It was my choice. That's what made it powerful. I wasn't forced into the background. I walked there on purpose, because legacy, I learned, isn't about being seen. It's about what remains when you're not in the room. Sometimes, during quarterly meetings, I'd catch glimpses of the new hires watching me. Curious, respectful, unsure. I saw their questions in their eyes. Why does everyone defer to him? What did he do to earn that kind of silence when he speaks? I never answered aloud. I let my presence tell the story. Because those who really wanted to learn, they'd figure it out, just like I did. One afternoon, while cleaning out an old drawer in my office, I found the card from the night of Emilia's promotion. It had been slipped under my keyboard that evening, anonymous. It simply said, "You deserved better." I had never shown it to anyone, never tried to trace the handwriting. But now, holding it in my hand again, I smiled. Not because I needed the validation, but because it reminded me that even in silence, someone had seen me. Sometimes that's enough. I kept the card this time, framed it actually, not as a trophy, as a reminder. That night didn't break me. It revealed me, and every decision I made afterward was forged in that fire. I raised my glass, yes, but I didn't toast her. I toasted time. Because time, when handled wisely, will always hand the truth back to the one who waited. And I had waited. Not in bitterness, not in fear, but in stillness. Now that stillness had become strength, and I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading quietly, powerfully, permanently. It's been over a year now since that night, the night the room applauded someone else for what I had built. And yet, looking back, I'm strangely grateful for it. Because if I had been promoted that night, I would have never discovered how much more powerful I was without the title. I would have never understood that real influence isn't assigned, it's revealed, not through praise or announcements, but through presence, patience, and the choice to stay still when every instinct tells you to react. People come to me now for more than operations. They come for direction, for clarity, for the kind of guidance that isn't printed in manuals. I've become something different, not a leader because of where I sit, but because of how I move. I've learned that legacy is what echoes in a room after you've spoken. It's how people feel when they remember how you handled the fire. And mine, I know, will echo long after I'm gone. I still walk past that ballroom sometimes, the hotel where everything changed. It's used now for weddings and conferences. Sometimes I pause outside, just for a moment, not to dwell, but to smile, because that was the night I learned I didn't need applause to matter. I just needed to stay true to who I was when no one was watching, and I did. There are new faces in the company now, fresh voices, brighter ideas, and I welcome them, not with fear, but with guidance. I tell them what no one told me, that quiet work isn't wasted, that not being seen doesn't mean you aren't shaping everything, that sometimes your greatest revenge is refusing to become the thing that hurt you. As for Amelia, I don't know where she is now, and I don't need to. Her chapter in my story has closed, not with bitterness, but with understanding. She taught me something valuable, that it's possible to be deeply disappointed and still remain dignified. That lesson cost me a title, but earned me something far more valuable, self-respect that no one can ever take again. And so I end this chapter, not with a promotion, not with a standing ovation, but with peace. The kind that comes from knowing I waited, I endured, I chose silence. And in the end, silence spoke loudest of all. I raised my glass, and I waited. And now, they all know why.